Around 2,000 accountants have come to Edexcel for what is the biggest Xerocon UK ever. And one of the things that this is a sign of is the massive surge in cloud accounting that we've seen thanks to MTD. Now, it's not just Xero that's benefited, but also the expense capture players like Receipt Bank and Auto Entry and Data Molino, because they're capturing the expense data and income data right at the start for small businesses. They've profited from the MTD effect as well. Now, with so many accountants here, Xero used the stage to announce Xero HQ, a sort of preferred partners platform for practice tools. And it also introduced Xero Expense. This is going to make the data capture people not quite so happy, because Xero's seen the opportunity in expenses capture and it wants part of that market too. Now, I talked to a couple of seasoned Xero watchers, and even though a show like this is all about technology, they kind of took me off into an interesting direction. So we've just bumped into Hannah Dawson from Futurely. Hannah, you've been a Xero developer for officially on the market for sort of 3 years now. It's been a fairly wild ride since you sort of joined the ecosystem. What's your perspective on what's happened since you came into this and come to a show this size now?
I think, Xero, we're 7 years in, or 10, 11 years in now, and we're 3 years in. There's been a lot of flying by the seat of many people's pants, I think, over the last 3 years, but developing the ecosystem into what it's become and seeing the developments like Xero HQ today, I think that there's been a huge amount of learning that's happened over the last 3 years. The education on cloud has kind of stopped. That's not necessary anymore. People understand what that is. But what's happening is realizing that, not every accountant wants to be an advisor necessarily. And I think that's okay to say. It's all right. But everybody needs a workflow and everybody needs a process. And for those that do want to move into advisory services, having this platform effect where that you can really gain efficiencies, improve your margins, attract more clients, just provide a better service is happening. It's actually happening now. There's been a lot of talk, but the ripple effect is actually happening, and we're seeing that with our the success rates that we're having now in the marketplace and the penetration that we're having, not just in the UK but globally, is that this workflow, this process, calling out the emperor's new clothes of what advisory has been in the past. I think there's a much bigger grasp on the human element, which is lovely to see that today, that it's not just about machine learning and AI, because frankly that's terrifying for the industry. It's like, am I going to be replaced? Well, no, we're just going to help you deliver a much better service in a much better time so that everybody has a better time of it.
So Bobbie Chatter from Propel, the new service from Deloitte, you're a seasoned cloud accounting watcher, and I gather this is your first Xerocon.
It is, yeah.
We've been hearing all about bank feeds, Xero having a new approach to practice management, projects, lots of new releases and things. But, the thing that strikes me is this, it gets bigger and bigger every year, and our stats are telling us, Xero really have laid a claim to be the new market leader. What's the landscape look like to you?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think Xero launched and they announced today that they've exceeded 250,000 users, which is brilliant for Xero. And I think as the industry as a whole, as cloud accounting software providers, they are growing very fast. For example, your QuickBooks, they're probably growing as fast as Xero right now with QuickBooks Online in the UK. And that's brilliant to see. Even the likes of Sage, who have obviously got this huge base on Sage 50, they're spending a lot of time and money in evolving Sage 1, and a lot of those changes now we're seeing as Sage 1 users, but also with the feature sets that they're announcing over the next 6 to 12 months. So that's brilliant to see as this industry goes. I think it's just great for small businesses in particular, because the challenges that small businesses have around funding needs and cash flow issues, and also collaborating with a trusted advisor. That's a word that's been bandied around quite often, but the accountant and bookkeeper truly is the trusted advisor for small businesses. And as these cloud software providers grow in user base, it could only benefit small businesses. For me, the big thing that I'm really interested in is the accountants. What you're seeing now is the likes of Xero, QuickBooks and Sage allowing accountants to become a lot more involved in their small businesses' clients' affairs, but not just at the year end. There's alerts in Xero HQ and also in QBOA that gives you insights around bank feeds and how many transactions you have to reconcile. There's also brilliant reporting in all the software engines as well, and that's really exciting for me because now I'm seeing a change in the accountants that I come across and the skill sets that they need.
It's quite novel, but a little refreshing to hear people at a software technology show start talking about the people dimension, and this is something that Xero backed up themselves. First, they frightened the audience a little bit by bringing along Richard Susskind to talk about his book, The Future of the Professions, which poses a scenario where bots and machine learning will actually remove a lot of jobs from the accountancy profession. But Gary Turner from Xero was very keen to sort of present the other side of the coin and the opportunities that might be presented. Gary, our statistics from the Practice Excellence Awards and the Software Excellence Awards have shown a really kind of some big changes in the market in the past year. What's your analysis of the situation?
I think we're 10 years into this journey of rewiring compliance, bookkeeping and accounting. And so we've been at it for a while. And I think we're now getting to the point where practices and their clients are increasingly defaulting to, if they're changing their systems, if they're changing their platforms, if they're starting up, then they're not thinking of Windows software anymore as the way to go. And obviously the more people do that, the bigger the community becomes. And I also think what's driving that, and we just announced over 250,000 subscribers now on the platform in the UK, is cloud software is going to penetrate the market much more deeply than desktop software ever did. More people are using cloud software, whether it's on their phones or tablets or whatever. The hurdles of getting up and running on desktop software don't exist. And therefore, the hypothesis is that cloud software will be adopted much more broadly than desktop software ever was. And I think we see that playing out.
So looking ahead to the next year, what do you think are the changes in technologies that are going to have the biggest impact on accountants and small businesses?
So the big ones, machine learning and automation and AI. And there's this debate about which professions are most likely to be computerized or turned into robots. And that's a really superficial way of thinking of it. And the conversation today may be about automation and machine learning and AI, but that's really just the latest chapter in a 40-year journey from the mainframe. And so that's not a new concept. But I think what we'll see in the next year or two is the embodiment of that, which is lots of people talking about it, not many people doing it. I think you'll see it appear in the software. I think you'll see it beginning to pop up. We've got it in the wild now in Xero and some of the account selection and coding. We're trying to experiment with this idea of getting away from charts of accounts for people that don't know what a chart of account is, and have a simplified machine learning model do that more effectively. So it's pretty mundane, but there's an interesting application for that there. And so I think we'll see that, and then the tussle between, well, what does that mean for the practice and their client engagement and the people and the skills? And we just did some research last month that said although the majority of practices and their clients expect that there will be more automation and more computerization of processes, something like 84% said they still wouldn't trust a chatbot or a machine learning model to give them advice. And so I think the challenge for the profession is to harness the benefits of automation, and we're obviously trying to help with that, but to really think about the role of the practitioner as that business advisor, giving advice, making judgments, using common sense, all the kind of things that machine learning models don't do. And so I think in the next 12 months we'll see that. And then of course all the legislative change with making tax digital, albeit slow down a little bit. And so I think the next 2 or 3 years will be huge. I think a lot on the go.
We've just been hearing a little bit of the doomsday scenario from Richard Susskind about the future of professions, and you know, the bots are going to sort of supplant many human accountants from their current roles. There is a lot of sensitivity in the profession about the interface between people and technology in the professional sphere. What's your formula, or can you bring comfort to the viewers?
Yeah, totally. I guess there would be a time where we would be slightly nervous about having this conversation with an accountant, because the whole, and I love it sometimes when I'm asked by journalists, not by your good self, John, but by much less learned journalists, that they think that things like Xero are somehow going to make accountants redundant and automation. And actually our philosophy is the flip side of that. I think cloud accounting and transforming practices with modern tools actually creates jobs and practices. It doesn't get rid of them. There will be some reconfiguration of like lower level bookkeeping and data entry roles will be better done by automation. But what we've seen in the research that we do, and we just shared that at Xerocon, we spoke to over 2,000 accountants globally, is getting out from the back office into the front office and spending more time with clients does rely on perhaps a different set of skills, more kind of reasoning, critical thinking, personal relationship management skills. But the firms that can get that are the ones that are actually creating employment and practices, because there's a new opportunity for them to grow their incomes and better serve their customers, and they're less the back office computation people that you never speak to and hardly ever speak to, maybe once a year. And so we think that this is the perfect storm of lots of AI and automation and cool thinking there. But actually, as I said in my presentation, we think the next big thing isn't artificial intelligence, the next big thing is people. We have to work out how the human elements of what business is about, managing clients, making judgments, kind of giving advice and guidance to small businesses isn't going to go away. And the research that we did reported back that although small businesses and clients will welcome automation, they absolutely wouldn't trust a chat bot to give them advice on their accounting anytime soon. And so we think it's the other side. We think more jobs are going to be created, which presents a challenge for the industry, because there's perhaps a surfeit of back office accounting professional roles and not so many in the front office, and the institutions probably have a role to play there. But we think it's ultimately great for the industry, definitely.
I mean, at Xerocon as well, you've made some announcements about bank feeds. You know, the HSBC came on board, and I think they're using more to come.
Yep.
How quickly do you think that landscape's going to change? You've had bank feeds before, but it's a new game in town, I take it.
It is. I mean, so we launched the whole kind of idea of a bank feed in the UK in 2009. And that was revolutionary, but it still meant sitting down and filling in a form and licking an envelope and posting it away, and then eventually your bank feed would work. And so maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the conversations with banks, who were otherwise detained with other industry issues at the time anyway, to cut them some slack. But what we've had is clearly PSD2, the new Payment Services Directive, that in spite of the fact of Brexit, the UK is still bound by. And obviously the Competition and Markets Authority report last year. And so we have this, if you speak to people in banks, there has never been more legislative change and pressure on them. They have no option but to yield to it. But what that's doing is the conversation that we've been having is now kind of merging with, well, they're going to have to do this anyway. So we've seen a huge explosion in interest from banks in the last 12 months. Not just because they have to do it, but they actually see great validation. And I think we'll take a little bit of credit for having introduced the concept and then had so many people using it. And now the banks are now taking notice of that. They're seeing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of businesses in the UK integrating their banks with an accounting platform like Xero. And then finally, that's the proof point that the banks have needed to say, yeah, we should move in this.
So if we're getting sort of fairly universal access to banking data, what are the potential, how does that play out for small businesses and their advisors?
So we think that bank feeds are now table stakes. If you're using an accounting product or financial management product and there isn't live banking information or integration with pensions and payment gateways and everything else, then you're behind the times. A big dimension that's still a concern for the banks, and obviously us as well, is the more that becomes digital, the more of a fraud surface that presents to nefarious interests. And so I think what you'll see emerging is not just slicker and easier and better integrated bank feeds, but a big theme on security as well. Because that's an increasing surface area of risk for everybody. But then beyond the kind of foundation level of banking data coming in out, which is interesting, but again, not really revolutionary anymore, It's how do we then integrate payment workflows? How do we identify so that you can prevent an SMB from making a fraudulent payment? You see lots of these invoice phishing things episodes is on the rise. And so I think we've got some work that we can collaborate with the banks on there to try and smooth that out as well.
So the message from Xerocon day one is that the bots may be coming, but if you're a practitioner, there's still a role for the human dimension in accounting. It's just you may need to rethink the kinds of skills you use and the kinds of people you need to hire. The message from Xero, to put it in Gary Turner's words, if you're part of the Xero family, the future is still very bright and it's very turquoise. Thanks for joining us and see you next time.